I would like to invite to the stage Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Rostislav Shurma, and also Stefan Braubacher, the head of SwissMem, Umbrella Association for Companies in Mechanical and Electric Engineering, that brings together SMEs and big businesses as well. So please, gentlemen, I welcome you on stage. Hello, Stefan. Yes, so please. It's just three of us, so we have plenty of room. And our first panel is focused on manufacturing. As we already heard, Ukrainian GDP is heavily affected by the war, At least minus 35%, GDP will shrink by that amount. It's a very serious figure. In 2020 alone and 2021 alone, Ukraine has done a lot in order to incentivize investment, to bring technologies, to bring manufacturing to Ukraine. We had new laws on industrial parks, we had new laws on state support for significant investments, and our GDP was supposed to grow by at least 3.4% in 2022. Now we have different figure. I also have a couple of different figures for you to consider. Now I'll be talking about our neighbors, Poland and Czech Republic. If we will compare GDP per capita, so GDP per capita in Poland is at least 3.6 times bigger than in Ukraine. GDP per capita of Czech Republic compared to Ukraine is 5.5 times bigger than in Ukraine. But I will tell you one more figure. Looking back at 1990, GDP of Ukraine was $81 billion and GDP of Poland was $65 billion. So that's almost $16 billion more than of Poland. That means that Ukraine can and Ukraine will recover quick. Ukraine will have to be rebuilt to a new level, to Ukraine 2.0, where we go from raw materials to a country that produce products with high value added. And we will have to do that much quicker than Poland, Czech Republic and other countries, because it's a matter of survival for Ukraine. It's not an option. We have to do that. So by doing so, and by doing so quick, we will create unprecedented investment opportunities for businesses that want to invest in manufacturing. And one of these cases today in the room, there will be intervention from company Kingspan, and you will hear about first of the investments that already has been announced during the war. On this note, I would like to pass the floor to our first speaker, Rostislav Shurma. Rostislav Shurma, he is the deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. He is responsible for economic bloc in Office of the President. But before his position, he was high-level, C-level official in big industrial company in Ukraine. So he comes from business. He knows state governance as well. So one of the best, I would say, state officials in Ukraine right now, who is in the right position, and he will tell us what kind of views Ukraine has in terms of development of manufacturing. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I've prepared some brief presentations just to have on the screen the keynotes that I will present and talk about. So just before starting what we want, so we need to understand what the developed world and the Europe and our partners, what expect from us and what we can propose to them. As we understand, there are three main directions basically where we can bring the value to the world. The first one is about the energy security. Traditionally, Russia was the main supplier of the energy resources, coal, gas, oil, all the fossil fuels to Europe. The future energy system looks a little bit different, and Ukraine can be the one that will supply the green energy security. Not only the green energy from solar and wind, but as well the hydrogen, the green fertilizers, and which will replace the Russian fossil fuels. Because we have everything for that. We have vast land, we have enough insulation, we have good wind, and we have good capacity to install all of that. The second value that we can propose to the whole developed world to become a manufacturing hub, specifically to localize what is labor and mineral-intensive industries. Traditionally, all the business has based their supply chains on China, but now after the COVID, we understand all the problems with the logistics and all the issues that the businesses had with that, and potentially political tensions. So I think specifically for the Europe, it's very important to have the manufacturing hub just at the distance of the hand nearby, at 48 hours delivery. That's why this is the second value that we can bring to the developed world and to the Europe. And the third value is about the agricultural and food security. We can produce enough grain and enough maize to basically provide the food to more than 400 million people, and basically we should use this. And now, based on these inputs, what we want to build in Ukraine in terms of manufacturing, in terms of moving up higher through the value chain. First one is a large cluster of the green energy, and this is not only about installing the solar farms, wind farms. This is about putting the whole production of the electrolyzers, about turbines, solar panels, storage systems that can be easily localized in Ukraine. The second is about the classical manufacturing. There are a lot of industries that have the great potential to be localized in Ukraine, starting from the very traditional metallurgy. But what we want not to sell the iron ore at the price of $100 or $150 per ton. We want to move higher to the steel products valued at $800 move to the steel construction valued at $2,000 per ton, move to the basic machinery with the value of $4,000 per ton. We can go further to mechanical engineering, where we can be a good contract manufacturing for all the European international brands to localize this in Ukraine, because we have quite a good skilled engineers, quite a good tradition of this industries in Ukraine. We can move further with the wood processing industry, because Ukraine is one of the biggest producers of wood materials in Europe, producing almost 20 million cubic meters, but we don't want to sell the wood valued $100 per cubic meter. We want to produce the wooden materials, the furniture, the specific pieces for the wooden construction with the value of about $3,000 per cubic meter. And we can provide many other examples, specifically for the construction industry, to have that localized completely in Ukraine, because this will be one of the biggest locomotives in Ukraine in the recovery process. To have the domestic production of the glass, which is now 100% imported. To have the domestic production completely of all the insulation materials, which are now 50% imported. And that's why one of the initiatives of the Kingspan company is a good sign for all of us. And the third block is about agricultural production, just to move again higher on the value chain from the typical grain and maize at the price of $150 to $300 per ton, to more value-added products like poultry, like pork, like milk products, like proteins, and many others with the value about $2,000 per ton. This is what we really want to do, and all of that is basically the area for the private business to invest in. And now let's check what we already have for these industries and what we still need to do, what homework we need to do, and what support from our partners we need to get. So the key for any business is to get the access to the markets. The Ukrainian market of 40 million people is not big enough to localize the big manufacturing hubs. So it's crucially important to have the access to the European Union and G7 markets. At the moment, we have the temporary solutions to open it for 1 year for most of them, but still many non-tariff barriers are left. And to do any investments, we need to have the guarantee and support of our partners that we have the full liberalization and full long-term access to the markets. And this is really crucial to any business investment. The second one is about availability of mineral resources. I think we are one of the best locations globally, not only in Europe, because all the majority of the materials, especially of the new economy, of green energy economy minerals, are deposited in Ukraine. So it's a good place to localize manufacturing. The third one is about the human capital. We have really decent, we have millions, dozens of millions of qualified engineers, well-educated, skilled people, highly motivated people that can really build and operate the factories that we are discussing about. And the fourth, which is really important, is about the logistics, about the infrastructure, and about the grids to transport all of these products to the markets. We have the base of them in place, the grids, the roads, the railways, but they are definitely not enough to basically to expand to the scales that we are discussing. So the huge investments, and not only private, perhaps the government investments would be needed to expand the logistics to the developed markets. Now let's focus what we really need to happen all of this. The first one is about the funding, about the capital, about the financial instruments to make that work. So very typical in any production, up to 50% of the value of any project is about the equipment. And this is about the opening the limits for the export credit agencies. And this is not only about the support of Ukraine, this is about the support for every country, its own business, which produces the equipment and can get a huge market in Ukraine to sell and supply this equipment to install this manufacturing. The second one is about opening the project finance limits, because another 50% is not about equipment, it's about building greenfield. And it's really important to have this tool in place. Then if we speak about the source of the funds, both for these tools and for the other funding, I think the most obvious one will be the sovereign guarantees for the private corporates that can be issued by the developed market governments to fund these projects. And it will take, I think, less than 0.5% of the GDP of the developed markets to fund all of these developments. And another source of fund can be the confiscated Russian assets, which can be pooled and specifically used to rebuild and build specifically the infrastructure in Ukraine. The first two things, this is what we really need and we expect from our international partners. The third one, the rule of law, which is really important for any business, and this is one of our key homework domestically that we have to do and implement. Number four, as well, is more about us, about the competitive tax system, because we do understand that when we compete for the new manufacturing sites, we compete with our neighbors, with the European countries like Hungary, like Bulgaria, like Romania. So it means that we should offer competitive and comparable tax system that they have in terms of profit tax, in terms of personal income tax, etc. And the first steps, as Sergei already told, we have already done. We have adopted the law on industrial parks and specific tax system, which will provide real tax incentives for the manufacturing to be installed in Ukraine. And the fifth, the last but not the least, I would say that the most important, which already my colleagues in the previous panel told, is about the security guarantees and about the military risk insurance. This is the most important tool now, and I think in the near future, even after we win in this war, so that any investor is comfortable that his factory, his building will not be destroyed by the hostile missile. And also there are some tools already existing globally. It's really important to fine-tune it and to adapt it to the new scale that we need in Ukraine, that it's really working and operating. And if we come back to the sources, to the instruments, to these tools for the military risk insurance, I think very important thing which will not require the direct funding from our partners is about the sovereign guarantees, about the small share of their GDP to expand their business, to expand their sales, and to build the Ukraine. Thank you.
Now I would like to give the floor to Stefan Brupaha, as I said, the chairman of SwissMem Association that brings together mechanical and electric engineering companies.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor for a couple of minutes. And I will also stand here because thinking about taking the microphone, fumbling with my papers, that wasn't an alluring thought for me. I will have 3 points. First, I will introduce you SwissMem and the Swiss machinery industry. Secondly, I will tell you why, in our view, manufacturing is globally important, key, and of course, then key to the Ukraine and Switzerland. And then, final point, Ukraine has existing and potential advantages comparative and real advantages in the manufacturing area, including then, of course, how we see the way forward. Allow me to start with Swiss machinery industry or Swiss manufacturing, electrical and metal industry. 90 billion turnover annual on an annual level. That is 7% GDP. That is nearly twice as much as the famous Swiss banks. Our companies, however, are mostly small and medium-sized family-owned enterprises, often third, fourth and fifth generation. Export rate is 80 to 90%. They often have international footprints and international production sites. They are very often or mostly in a niche market present, but in that niche market, they are technology leaders. According to a study of the World Economic Forum, on the future of manufacturing, Switzerland is one of the key areas, third placed for the future of manufacturing. That not only because of us, but because we are part of the Alpine industrial cluster with southern Germany, western Austria and northern Italy. Now these companies, they are mostly members of SwissMem. SwissMem, most tech-oriented, export-oriented companies are members of SwissMem. We are organized in 24 industry sectors. In other countries, they would be associations as well. We are together. One area, and that is not manufacturing, but I allow myself to transgress for 30 seconds. One area where our companies have a key competence, and the previous presentation just mentioned in a significant way, is energy production. We have industry sectors with new energy systems, transmission distribution, power to X, for example, a new platform, which involves ABB, Siemens, Alstom, General Electric, Hitachi Energy, etc. All these players, members in Switzerland and ready to engage with you. Now back to manufacturing, the core of SwissMem. Here we have industry sectors such as machine tool industry with around 100 companies. Those companies are not household names because it's B2B, but they are global technological leaders. Textile industry, precision tool industry, and the die and mold industry. Yet machines alone won't be sufficient anymore in the future, because you move from the machine to the production cell and then to the production line. Hence, assembly and factory automation is key in the future as we see it, including, of course, then packaging, conveyor sector. And I give you one example. Wiring harnesses has been one of Ukraine's key industries. Now, since the war broke out, we know or we have felt that these can't be produced, or there are difficulties to produce wiring harnesses. However, at the same time, one of our member companies started to be flooded by orders for automated machines to produce harnessings. And hence you see how there is a natural trend in the direction of automation and digitalization. I could add on, as the previous speaker has mentioned, one of the lowest hanging fruits, that is agro-manufacturing. And we have companies there as well, Bühler, Bucher, Syntegon Packaging Systems, which you might know, or you are invited to get to know them. They are all engaged in increasing efficiency, reducing waste, pesticide, energy consumption, etc. But more importantly, and I think you mentioned it, allow me one, at first sight, crazy example. Switzerland is one of the biggest coffee exporters without producing one single coffee bean. Why? Because the manufacturing industry helped Nestlé and Nespresso to establish the Nespresso production lines, which are all in Switzerland. Of course, in that line, it would of course be much more, it would be interesting for you to use these manufacturing capacities to move, as you mentioned just a minute ago, from a raw material producer much more into processed food producer, increase the value added you get, and of course, the return of investment you get. We feel that manufacturing is, in general, undergoing a structural change caused by the disruption of supply chains, the weakening of globalization, but also enabled by digitalization. This has the following consequences. Resilience of supply chains will be on par with efficiency. Regional production for regional markets will be one key. Digitalization will merge with hardware, favoring countries which are strong in both areas, and climate change will require production and transportation to be climate neutral, at least if you export to the European market in 10 to 20 years. Against that background, Ukraine has significant advantages and proven assets. You have a highly motivated workforce. The company's members to Swissmem tell us who are active in Ukraine. And you, of course, have highly competitive wage structure. B, engineering and, above all, IT and cyber expertise is well ingrained in Ukraine, as you mentioned before. Third, or C, legal integration into the European market will have to take place swiftly, and as a Swiss, where all legislative processes take a long time, let me assure you that this is an advantage. It might be tough, but it is an advantage because you create legal security. You mentioned that this is one of the key areas for industry. And you mentioned a wonderful list, what is needed. Actually, if you implement these things, then industry has, of course, the best investment conditions. Now, manufacturing, Ukrainian-Swiss collaboration could take place in at least two areas. On the one hand, Swiss machinery could be exported to Ukraine to rebuild the manufacturing base, and B, of course, more interestingly for you, because it would create jobs, wealth or growth and stability. Swiss companies could invest in Ukraine. Now, you have already the best ambassadors for that with companies such as Weidmann or Swiss Krona, who are already active in your country still now and today. And I think by helping these companies importing from their production, and you from the government side as well, you create that these ambassadors will bring other companies as well. Now, allow me to look at my final point, the way forward. I think, and I'm honest with you on that, on the manufacturing side, when I say Swiss companies, our members are small and medium-sized companies, there is a clear lack of information of these companies about the potential of Ukraine. Hence, it is key to know what you need when and how we can collaborate. It will be key to have a process established from today on knowing, on get to know each other. And if I understand correctly, that Ukraine Invest will be the one-stop shop, then after having understood that, I'm rather positive that we can start this process from today on, and it will be fruitful. Be ensured that, as someone has mentioned before, Team Switzerland, the team of Swiss Global Enterprise, Swiss Export Insurance Agency, SURF, and different associations such as Swissmem, Swiss Rail, etc., we are all committed that our companies can get the information, can get the investment opportunities, and thereby contribute to the reconstruction or build back better Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention and for the future collaboration. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. Mechanical engineering will be very important while rebuilding Ukraine, specifically manufacturing. And when we had a small chat with you before the conference, and you were saying that it will be important for Ukraine to get equipment and so on. And I said, yes, we can get that equipment. And Stefan said, no, you don't understand. I'm saying we have to produce this equipment in Ukraine. So this is about goodwill. It's a goodwill of international partners. They not only want to supply to Ukraine, not only sell to Ukraine, they want to help Ukraine develop. This is very important. So talking about the will, goodwill for Ukraine, I would like to ask Mike Stenson from Kingspan company to make an intervention. Mike Stenson, he is the head of innovation at Kingspan, is the global Irish-American company that announced significant investment during the war. He is also heading Ukrainian projects. So, Mike, please, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Sergey. So Kingspan, the group, is a global manufacturer of sustainable building products headquartered in Ireland. And some people may know that we made a decision recently to invest 200 million euros in a building materials technology campus in Ukraine. We believe that this is the first major investment done by a Western organisation since the war began. When the campus is complete, we'll employ 600 people, and we're currently working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ukraine Invest to try to find the most suitable location. We've taken the decision to invest in Ukraine despite the current volatility and uncertainty. We're very confident, though, in the long-term future of Ukraine as an independent nation. It's an ideal location for us to strategically expand our capacity in the region, and we cannot be but impressed by the resilience and future vision demonstrated by the Ukrainian people and their leadership. The ambition to rebuild the Ukrainian economy as a model for innovation and green technologies is enormously attractive to a business like ours. We welcome this international focus on investment in Ukraine and look forward to many other such organisations and businesses having the same belief and confidence in Ukraine as a strategic business location. And finally, I'd like to thank Sergey and his colleagues at Ukraine Invest for their outstanding support so far in this project, and we will continue to cooperate. Thank you very much.
One small comment from me, Kingspan was one of the first companies to leave Russia and the first company to come during the war with significant investment. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite another distinguished guest at our conference, Mr. Fabio Regatzi, President of SGV USAM, to make an intervention as well.
Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to make a short statement. Swiss small and medium-sized enterprises and Ukrainian firms are already bound by the value and the supply chain. This is true for services, and it's especially true for the industrial and manufacturing sector. In the Swiss Federation for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, we have several entrepreneurs with production plants in the Ukraine. Several of these plants were bombed and destroyed in this war, but the Swiss side is eager to rebuild and continue their economic activities. They need, however, a safe and secure environment and the usual guarantees for their property. As Swiss entrepreneurs in Ukraine, they want to be included in the rebuild processes, as I am sure other Swiss companies will take this situation as a way into the country. The aim is to generate prosperity and, with it, peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we have to conclude our session. We're a bit over time. Just one small question from me to panelists. On call for action, you represent government, you represent business. What would be the call for action from you to business and call for action from business to government in Ukraine? Just what, like, first steps?
I'll start. So I think I would suggest that all the businesses at least start to study the market opportunities, because normally from the doing any deal or specifically to starting build up some office, some factory, something like that, it normally takes 3, 6, 9 months, because there is some preparation process, land acquisition, pre-approvals, engineering, feasibility study, etc. So my call would be, don't lose time. We will finish this war, we will win, and be the first to come.
Thank you, Ben. 3 short points. A, provide us the information and establish a platform by which industry can get to know both the regulation and B, other Ukrainian companies, JVs you mentioned, for example. Point 2, put in place the what we need slide and start immediately with small issues or with small improvements, such as border controls being ever more faster. I think those are the elements which make that your ambassadors, Weidmann, Swiss Krona, go to the Swiss companies and tell them Ukraine is the place.
Thank you. And just to conclude this session, it's a very short session just to outlay some, basic foundations. I think that the success with a triple I, intention, innovation, and insurance. Intention and innovation, that's on the side of businesses. You will enter Ukraine and you will bring technologies. Insurance, this is about Ukraine, how to insure foreign business and Ukrainian business in Ukraine and foreign partners. So we will be working on that. And Ukrainian army is also there and will be protecting your investment during the war and after the war. Trust me on that. And Ukrainian people throughout the country, they are waiting for you and you will be successful in our country. On this note, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and, well,